Okay, great. So that should be recording now. So just a brief overview of the session today then. My name's Laura Connolly. Nice to see some familiar names, but I don't think I've met all of you. So I'm the postgraduate research admissions lead. I'm joined by my colleague Kate, who you'll hear from later on. Kate's the director of postgraduate research. And I'm joined by another colleague, Thomas, who will reflect on his experiences of doing a PhD in sociological studies. We're also joined by our colleague James Peacock, who won't be presenting, he's giving you a wave there. He won't be presenting today, but might come in around some of the questions later on, perhaps. As I said, we're going to present some information, but there will be time for you to ask any questions that you have later on. So feel free to post those in the chat, or you can knock your microphone on later on. Okay, so a little bit of information first of all around the PhD application process. So the key feature of a PhD is that it's yours. The topic, the planning, the motivation behind it, the thinking very much all comes from you. So we expect the research idea to come from you, although perhaps some of your prospective supervisors might help you to shape that research idea. The first thing that you really need to be doing then is, if you've not done so already, have a think about what that idea is and start to develop it into a research proposal. There's lots of information on our web pages. You can see these links here, and I'll post the links in the chat when I finish speaking, but lots of information on our sociological studies web pages about what a research proposal is and what we expect to see in one. So in short, we'd like to see a provisional title and some research questions and/or aims. We'd like you to provide a kind of brief overview of the existing literature in your area, some description of your topic, why is this research important? Why is it needed? What is the gap that your project is trying to fill, the gap in knowledge? And then how you'll carry out that research and what time frame you'll use to get you to successful completion. The research proposal then is around 1,000 to 2,000 words, so brevity is like key here. And you'll see that again if you apply for scholarships. You don't have many words to play around with, so brevity is really important. The next step then is to make contact with some prospective supervisors. So you need to really start to identify who are the experts in your field. Have a look on our web pages, the staff that are part of sociological studies, and start to identify which members have the necessary expertise and skills to supervise your project. You can reach out to those prospective supervisors and provide a draft of your research proposal, and they might even work with you to refine that proposal at that point. Or they may ask you to make a formal PhD application before they feed into that proposal. Please do try to avoid sending your proposal to all members of staff in the department. Really have a think and be selective. Who has the skills and knowledge to supervise your project? And then the next step is to make that formal application. You do this via our university postgraduate application system. So we can't accept PhD applications that come to us via email. They must go through that system. And again, I'll pop these links into the chat later on. When you go through onto the university PGR application system, it asks you to fill in various sections, and it will talk you through what supporting documents you'll need to make your application as well. And then usually we ask for an interview. Before we can offer a PhD place, your prospective supervisors will conduct an interview with you. So that, in very broad terms, is the kind of application process. We have certain requirements, entry requirements. So for candidates who are applying for a PhD with an undergraduate degree, we require at least a 2:1 or the equivalent at undergraduate level. So this is the entry requirement for anyone who's considering applying for the 1+3.5 programme, the MA plus PhD programme, which is one of the scholarship routes I'll talk about later. Candidates applying who are or have undertaken a master's, we require at least a merit or equivalent. Generally, we'd expect these degrees to be broadly in the area of sociology or a related discipline like social policy, social work, perhaps some kind of related social science discipline. But we can consider applications where the applicant has relevant professional experience if their education to date has been outside of the social sciences. And then just to flag, if you're an international candidate, so English is not your first language, or you haven't studied in English in an English-speaking country for your undergraduate or master's degree, we do require an IELTS average of 6.5 or above, and no less than 6.0 in any of the individual components of that. All right, so I thought I'd briefly now move on to scholarships, talk you through some of the available scholarships, and then we'll focus in on one in particular. So alongside several other universities, Sheffield is part of the White Rose Doctoral Training Partnership. And so applicants are eligible to apply for a White Rose DTP ESRC scholarship. This route is open to both UK applicants and also international applicants. And these scholarships cover a stipend and also fees at the home level. And those fees will be topped up by the university for international award holders. I'll talk more about this scholarship soon because it's the one that probably is most relevant. It is relevant to most of you. It's certainly the one we receive the most scholarship applications for. But we also have the White Rose College of Arts and Humanities Scholarship. So that it might be possible that for a few of you, your work aligns within the arts and humanities. So this scholarship route might be applicable for you, particularly if your work focuses around kind of cultural studies, media information studies, perhaps gender, sexuality studies. Have a chat with your prospective supervisors if you're unsure about whether you're kind of a good fit for this scheme. It's got the same eligibility requirements as the White Rose DTP, so available for both UK and international applicants. We have our university awards. These are very competitive. There will be 5 this year. And this year, as part of the university's commitment to increasing opportunities for racially minoritized students, these scholarships are open to Black or Black British, so of African or Caribbean heritage, Asian or Asian British, so Bangladeshi, Pakistani and Indian heritage, or multiple ethnic backgrounds, including one of those ethnic groups that I've just listed. And another key scholarship route is our China Scholarship Council partnership with the University of Sheffield. We're awaiting more information on this scholarship route this year, but this is applicable for those of you who are a national of or reside in mainland China and intend to return to China once your PhD is complete. Importantly, for this scholarship, you need to have an unconditional offer from the University of Sheffield. So you need to have met the academic and the language criteria, those eligibility criteria I mentioned. So you need to have a master's already in order to have this unconditional offer. That is those scholarship routes in really broad terms. So do have a look into these for more detail. And you can find links to all of the relevant websites if you go through our sociological studies web pages and you click on the PhD section, fees and scholarship. We update that regularly. So if you click there, you can see which scholarships are currently open and which you can apply for. All right, I want to now just zoom in and focus on one particular scholarship. This is the White Rose Social Science Doctoral Training Partnership ones. So the White Rose DTP is a regional consortium of universities, and it's funded via the ESRC, which is the Economic and Social Research Council. This year, there will be various pathways, so various scholarships that you can apply for, 28 of which will be what are called pathway awards. So these are scholarships that are student-led, so they're your ideas, and they can be on any topic, provided it falls within the kind of broad remit of the ESRC and aligns with the various pathways of the White Rose DTP. There are also 2 ring-fence scholarships for Black British students, which are in partnership with the Stuart Hall Foundation. There are 2 scholarships known as interdisciplinary awards, up to 2 advanced quantitative method scholarships, and then new for this year, up to 2 advanced data analytics awards. So this is a new pathway. It's for applicants who are using kind of cutting edge data analysis techniques that can be qualitative or quantitative, or projects that kind of deploy large scale or big data, or use forms of analysis that are not very commonly used within the social sciences. So it might be particularly relevant for those of you working in the field of kind of like media, digital media and society. I wanted to flag up, some of you who may have looked at scholarship routes in previous years will have heard of maybe a 1+3 or a +3. This year, there are actually 3 programme routes available via the White Rose DTP scholarships. I'll just briefly talk you through each one so you can see which would be most relevant for you. So if you're a student who doesn't currently have a social science master's, then the 1+3.5 programme is the one for you. So this will provide funding for a 1-year master's, which is a master's in social research delivered by our colleagues in the SMI, so Sheffield Methods Institute. And then it will be followed by 3.5 years of funding for your PhD. So that master's equips you with the research training that you'll need for your PhD. A second route is for those of you who already have a master's, and that master's included at least 60 credits of social science research methods training. So these credits can't be from your dissertation, they have to be separate to that. 60 credits of research methods training. Then you're eligible to apply for a 3.5 programme, 3.5 years of PhD funding. The final route is if you have a master's, but that master's included fewer than 60 credits of social science research training. You're then eligible for a 1+3.75 programme, and this is an integrated PG Cert and PhD. So in essence, in that additional time, that additional funded period, you'll undertake those 60 credits of research methods training in your first year of your PhD. And the PhD will be extended slightly to reflect that additional workload. The application then, when you apply for this scholarship, you'll see that it very much focuses on the quality of your research and the potential for that research. So it'll ask you about your project, about the methods, ethical considerations. It'll ask you to reflect on the fit between your research and the White Rose DTP. But it'll also ask you to reflect on your motivations for doing the research and ask you to evidence your potential to undertake that doctoral level research. Okay, final slide before I hand over to Kate. I wanted to just talk you through that scholarship application process. So I mentioned earlier about how you apply for a PhD. That is a separate but related process to applying for the scholarship. So you need to do both of those things, apply for a PhD and apply for scholarships. So the first thing to do is you need to secure a PhD place to be eligible for consideration in any of those scholarship schemes. So please apply for that PhD no later than the 11th of January, preferably earlier if you can. But that is the final deadline for applying for your PhD. And if we receive your PhD application after that date, I'm afraid we can't consider your scholarship applications, okay? So if you're intending to apply for a scholarship, you must apply for the PhD before the 11th of January. And that's because we need time to assess your application. We need to find supervisors. We need to make sure that all the supporting documents are in place, and that all takes quite a bit of time. We also, in our experience, think it's helpful for you to have some dedicated time and headspace after you've applied for the PhD to focus solely on those scholarship applications. The next step then, once you've submitted your application for the PhD, is to work on your scholarship applications. Most of these scholarships can be applied for via that postgraduate application system that I mentioned before. So when you go into that, you're able to tick boxes for all of the scholarships that you intend to apply for, and that will open up the appropriate application forms for each one. The only exception is for the ROCA AHRC scheme, where you apply directly to ROCA. The scholarship deadline for all of these schemes then is the 24th of January by 5 p.m. UK time. As part of these scholarship applications, you'll need to provide a slightly shorter research proposal and various other pieces of information. And we strongly encourage you to work with your prospective supervisors to get some comments on a draft of your scholarships before you submit. In fact, we'll ask your prospective supervisors whether they've done that as part of the application. So make sure you've received that feedback to put you in the best possible place for a successful outcome in those applications. Thereafter, a departmental shortlisting will take place. We as a department will put forward some applicants to the faculty, and then they will carry out their own shortlisting and nominate some applicants to the funder. We'd anticipate that you would hear the outcome of all of this by the end of April, and we do try to keep you posted, informed at various stages of the process. The final thing that I just wanted to flag here is just to emphasize how competitive these scholarships are. Not to put you off, but just to kind of help you to be realistic about chances of success. So remember that there are only around 35, 36 scholarships in that White Rose DTP consortium, and that's made up of 7 universities. We as a department have a really strong track record of success. So last year, if I remember correctly, we had about 5 ESRC studentships, so a really, really strong performance. But you really do need to work very hard on those applications, work closely with your prospective supervisors, and remember to check the assessment criteria. Have a look on the web pages for the scholarships, have a look at what criteria will be used to judge your application, and bear that in mind as you're writing it. Okay, I think that's plenty from me. Kate, over to you.
Oh, thanks, Laura. Okay, so I think Laura said I'm the Director of Postgraduate Research in the department. So that means once you're in the department, I look after you, basically. So what I wanted to talk about is a bit about what's it actually like to do a PhD in sociological studies at Sheffield. So we currently have around 80 PhD students in the department. So we've got quite a healthy PhD community. And one of the things that's important for a PhD study is your supervisors. And we make sure that you have an appropriate supervisory team. And that team is mostly 2 people, so 2 colleagues. Often both of those colleagues are from the department, but sometimes supervisors come from another department or even from another faculty. And occasionally students have 3 supervisors. That might happen if it's a particularly interdisciplinary topic. The preferred model of supervision in the department is joint supervision, and that basically means that both of the supervisors, assuming that you've got 2 supervisors, will have an equal input into supervision. So there's an expectation that both of your supervisors will attend all of your supervision meetings. So when you come into the department, a PhD broadly starts by undertaking a training needs analysis. This is a university-wide requirement, so not just sociological studies. And you develop your training needs analysis with your supervisor. I mean, it's basically working out what development and training do I need to do, and it's a live document. So you continue to review it over the course of your study, and you would revise it and change it as you go along. And it really is a document to help you reflect on the development you've done so far, and to identify other areas of development as you go along. And it's sort of examples of things that you might put into your training needs analysis would be perhaps methods training. So there's an expectation that everybody now comes in with the kind of basic set of methods training. But what you might want to do as part of your PhD is undertake some advanced methods training, or learn about a particular technique to add to methods training that you've already had. And another area where you might want to undertake some training is around professional skills. So, for example, this might be something like engaging with stakeholders or speaking at conferences. And there's a whole set of training available to PhD students in the department that cover a range of advanced methods and this a sort of set of professional skills training. Another important aspect of being a PhD student in the department is the postgraduate research conference, which happens every year. This is organised by our first year PhD students, and it's really in part about building a PhD community, so getting the first year students working on something together. And it also actually helps to build a broader research community within the department because it brings staff and students together. And actually, it also provides a very safe and a gentle way to practice talking about your research as you learn to become an academic, to be a scholar. In the department, we have a dedicated PhD study space, and we also have a social space which is shared with staff and students. So the PhD students share that with staff, and that's a really nice place or nice space to meet up. For example, to have an informal chat over a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, or maybe have your lunch and have a chat. Another thing that prospective students are often interested to hear about is what teaching opportunities there are in the department. And there are always, pretty much every year, there's an opportunity to apply to be a graduate teaching assistant. So, and that is open to students in their second year and beyond. You don't have to do this. You're not obliged. It's really up to you. But you would receive training if you decide to do it, and it's definitely something you might want to consider doing if you're thinking that you'd like to have an academic career. And also, of course, it's a way to earn some additional money. The other thing to say is that there's a lot of support available for PhD students around careers. There's university resources, both for PhD students and early career researchers. And that is both for people who do want to pursue an academic career and for people who want to pursue a career outside of the academy. So there's dedicated career support for PhD students, whichever career pathway you're planning to pursue. Thinking about the, sorry, Laura, could you bob the slide on one for me? Thank you. Thinking about kind of other ways that we support PhD students and I think one of the major things around this is about progression milestones. So the university sort of lays out a set of standard progression milestones. These are reviews that happen at regular intervals over the course of the PhD, and they're really designed to support students' progress, to help students make sure they progress successfully. They're kind of checkpoints at which students review what they've done so far, so review their progress and help to plan what they think would be the priorities going forward over the following 6 months. And it also helps us to identify any support that you might need for that progression. And the very first milestone is when students come in as part of the induction is to complete that training needs analysis that I already mentioned in my previous slide. And then hopefully these milestones help PhD students along the way to submit within their fee-paying period. So the fee-paying period is slightly changed now with the changing funding landscape. The fee-paying period is mostly 3 years if you're a self-funding student, but we've seen, as Laura's talked about, there's that move to 3.5 years for some of the major funding schemes now. So the milestones are all adjusted accordingly in terms of that 3 or 3.5 year timescale. And all of this is in place really to help students successfully navigate and complete their PhD. Next slide, please, Laura. Thanks. And I just wanted to talk a little bit more about the research community in sociological studies. So there's a very strong research culture. All academics in the department are research active, and there's lots of things that you can get involved in as a PhD student in terms of the research community. And so the first thing I wanted to flag was our research themes. So all of the research that we do in the department fits into these overall research themes, and all research active staff and students fit with at least one, if not more, of the themes. And many of us align with more than one of these. And I've listed them on the slide and put a link so you can find out more about these research themes. So when you apply for a PhD in the department, particularly if intending to apply for funding, it's really a good idea to have a look at these research themes and kind of try to see where the fit is, and then try and weave that into your narrative about the fit between you and the department. It's a really good way to do that. Research staff in the department and PhD students are also aligned with a range of research centres and networks that go beyond the department, so cross department or cross faculties or cross disciplinary groups. And again, I'd suggest you have a look at these centres and networks that the department aligns with, and again the link is on the slide, and see where your interests align. And again, it's really good if you can to signpost this in your application, particularly if you're applying for a scholarship. We also have lots of events within the department. So we currently have a weekly seminar series, which is organised in collaboration between the research themes. And we also have an annual lecture series for the major disciplines in the department. And those disciplines basically are sociology, social policy, digital media society, and social work. So we have an annual roster of 4 annual lectures. Okay, next slide, please. Thank you. So that was just basically a sort of quick overview of what it's like to do a PhD in the department and what you can expect kind of if you study with us. And I just wanted to reiterate what you'd already heard from Laura, who is our PGR admissions tutor. And so basically she and I are both very happy to respond to questions. We also have a PGR support officer who will also answer any questions about kind of admissions processes or applying for a PhD. And James, who's here today, is covering this role at least until January. So in the first instance, if you've got questions about process, James will be very happy to answer those. But in any case, even beyond January, that email address, that SCS PGR email address is always answered, so that you can always send questions there. And I'm finished. So now we're going to hand over to Tom, who is a current PhD student in the department, and he's very kindly said he will talk about his experience of being in the department and what it's like to study with us. And after that, we'll just open it up for all your questions. So thank you very much. Take it away, Tom.
Thanks, Kate. Hello, everyone. My name's Tom Wright. I'm a second-year PhD student in Sociological Studies. My research is luckily fully funded by the AHRC through ROCA, so the White Rose College of Arts and Humanities that Laura kind of briefly touched upon earlier on, which is a training college that's established solely between the universities of Sheffield, Leeds and York. So in logistical terms, this essentially means that they pay me a stipend, which is a bit like a salary, and that they cover my fees to study there. So that's kind of allowed me to go on and study my PhD. These different scholarships, as Laura mentioned, competitive and will vary. Like as Laura mentioned, my research broadly fits into the digital media and society kind of research strand within the department. So within digital media, I could kind of focus my application towards the Arts and Humanities College for funding, and that just allowed me to focus on different things. So I suppose it's kind of important to think about what it is that you're necessarily fundamentally interested in, what kind of research approach that you might want to adopt when you're doing your research, and then kind of choose maybe the scholarship funders that allow you to kind of, or that allow you to do that and facilitate that kind of research. So when I was applying, I was working full time, and applying took up a lot of my time, I think. So I would try to I'd kind of treat it as though it was a part-time role, and I diverted quite a lot of my attention and efforts to ensure that I put a good application together and spoke to a few different people at different universities, and then was able to kind of, through the support of my supervisors that I got in touch with at Sheffield, I was then able to kind of really shape and kind of hone my scholarship application once I had my initial application accepted for a place on the programme at Sheffield, and was really able to kind of hone it into the best possible application, which consequently resulted in me getting the funding. So it worked quite well. So I think it's just an approach of reaching out, speaking to different people, kind of figuring out what they're kind of into, what you're kind of into, whether they align, and then whether fundamentally they're the kind of people that you want to work with. And I knew that Sheffield was the right place for me because my supervisors were willing to give me lots of their time in spite of not knowing me at all. I've never really read anything that I put together other than my initial application. And they were extremely supportive and encouraging about my project, and helped me guide everything kind of into PhD and then beyond as starting. So I started my PhD in October 2022, after a year of working full time and being away from my masters for a little bit of time. So I kind of get back on the horse, so to speak, which I found good because that kind of year gave me some real appetite to kind of get stuck back into study. But then it also kind of gave me I was kind of cognizant of the fact that I needed to relearn bits and take lots of bits on, especially being in lots of extracurricular bits on, especially being in a sociological studies department, because PhDs are kind of fundamentally independent projects that when it all boils down to, I'm solely responsible for delivering. I kind of was well aware of the strengths and weaknesses that I had walking into a sociological studies department, and I was able to kind of talk through these with my supervisors, which led me to taking on various and auditing various different MA modules for kind of social research and qualitative research skills, and to kind of contextualize the work that it's taken as a PhD, I think over the past year or so. I think it might be a useful way of conceptualizing it as thinking about, depending whichever stage you're at in your kind of study journey, for lack of a better word, thinking about your kind of dissertations or final year projects that you might have undertaken, kind of times in that by maybe like 4 or 5, and then times in that by over like kind of 3 years or 3.5 years in my case. So it means that the highs are really amplified, as well as the kind of tough bits too. So for this reason, it's kind of important that you choose the best supervisory team possible, and choose the topic that you're most interested in. So I'm supported by 2 different supervisors, and I meet with them every month and produce a small amount of work every month that then accumulates into a large amount of work over the entire year. This is a kind of an arrangement that I came to when I first started my PhD with them, just to kind of we were trying to kind of figure out and ascertain what might be the best approach. And I said that I work to kind of regular deadlines, so we established them, and that means that we get to meet regularly, and I get regular feedback on my work. So it's a kind of good way of knowing where I'm at, and knowing where I can kind of improve. And that tends to be the same kind of approach for a lot of my peers. So it means that you're kind of all in the same boat when it means to doing a PhD. You kind of like figure out the low bits. So when you get some the high bits, sorry, when you get some really good bits of feedback, and then when you get some feedback that means you might to improve or something happens, that you're kind of all in the same boat. So your peers and the PGR community should and can be a major source of support, encouragement, and friendship when things do get a bit harder, because it is inevitably a step up from a master's and an undergraduate degree. So the first year of work for me was consisted primarily of undertaking extra training that I took on like a voluntary basis, and then also working up to the confirmation review, which is a meeting that takes place, kind of like an oral assessment at the end of your first year, and that's the kind of basis of your first year to work up to that, and it's kind of serves the purpose of proving that you've got both the skills and the knowledge set at that point to be able to go on and finish your PhD. So it was I found it to be a really, really useful exercise, and that's kind of informing the work that I'm doing now as I go into my second year and kind of use that literature review and kind of basis for my understanding and research to then go on and work with my case study organisations in my second year before I go on into my third year, and then start to write everything up in theory. So that's kind of a little bit about my PhD journey. Hopefully that's covered quite a lot, but if there's any questions at the end, then I'd be really happy to pick some up. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Tom. That's super useful, and thanks, Kate, before that. I'm just going to stop the recording, and whilst I do so, feel free to post any questions that you have in the chat, or raise your hand and we can and you can ask them verbally.